Well, hi everyone. Apologies, we are struggling to uh, put up my PowerPoint presentation. For some reason, it's not allowing me to share the PowerPoint presentation. So I will just go ahead and start while hopefully our technical support in the background can sort this out for us. My name is Dr. Angelo Urcia, and I am an evaluator and researcher in digital health and also public health and healthcare systems. Basically, I've done a lot of different types of research and evaluation projects in public health and health service research. Uh, and I was invited today to speak about clinical research 101 in hopes that it will give you insights on what clinical research means because it's such a huge topic. Just a bit of my background. My background originally was in public health. I was trained and from California. I was trained in public health in the US, and I worked for a couple of years in the US as a public health practitioner, where we tried to develop different types of interventions, public health interventions, specifically for mental health and also chronic diseases in communities of color and low income communities across the Bay Area. I worked a lot in charity organizations and nonprofit. And so I incorporated my skills in public health, but then also research, because we were trying to use research to figure out how do you actually develop effective interventions to address chronic diseases or infectious diseases and also mental health. And so my work has always been in public health, but I moved into a little bit more of research when I then worked on my PhD in evaluating how the US Affordable Care Act was impacted access to care to low-income population across California, Arizona, and Texas. And so that's where I really focus more on research. And so now in my career, I've married the two of actual practice of doing evaluation and implementing interventions, particularly in digital health, and then also research, because they are very much intertwined with each other, research and also implementation and evaluation and monitoring. And it's really important to have good skill sets in these approaches. So the aim of this presentation is I'll try to cover what is clinical research, why it matters, how clinical research works, real impact of participants in getting involved. Apologies, we can't share my PowerPoint. Let me try again just to see if it works, because it will make my speech a little bit more effective. But let's see. See if this works one last time. Hopefully it works. If not, apologies, and we'll hopefully be able to share these presentation slides with you after. So what is clinical research? Clinical research is, it's a big umbrella term. It's the study of health and illness in people. It includes discovering new drugs, medical device therapies, and diagnostic tools. As you all know, digital health is a big topic at the moment. This goes under the term clinical research. We do a lot of clinical research in digital health now, and making sure that any type of digital health innovation is being tested before it's actually being used in public. The aims of clinical research includes it includes to explore the cause of disease, a set of symptoms. It also tests if a treatment will help with symptoms or condition. We also aim to learn how a certain behavior affects people's health. And it also applies, I can see that, I believe my slides is up now. applied the finding to save lives and improve quality of life. So next slide is why clinical research matters. To me, I believe these are some of the reasons why clinical research matters. There's a lot of rationale why it's important, it's vital to do clinical research. One is discovering new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat diseases. This is how we discover new treatment, medications, ways to prevent diseases. This is how the COVID-19 vaccination was developed, was because of clinical research. It also helps us improve safety and efficiency of existing treatment. So there's many different types of medications, many types of treatment, many types of approaches to prevention, but we constantly have to make sure that we test it out and evaluate it and determine if it is effective or not, or do we need to change things. And so clinical research allows us to determine is the treatment still safe? Is it still efficacious? If not, why not? And are there other ways to improve the way we prevent, diagnose, and treat diseases? Study genetics, lifestyle, and personalized medicine. At the moment, there's a huge focus on personalized medicine, meaning that treatment is specifically developed to cater to your needs and to your background. And so clinical research allows us to test out different ways. How do we actually develop personalized treatment and approaches to make sure we help you to achieve optimal health? It enhances medical guidelines and improves service delivery based on real world data. As you know, there are many guidelines that clinicians have to follow, that public health professionals have to follow. There's a lot of regulations that must be followed in delivering care and preventative care and public health. And so clinical research allows us to make sure that our guidelines are up to date. And whether it needs to be changed or not. And lastly, but not least, it informs health policy or policy. Findings from clinical research certainly influences policy. It certainly influences people who have decision making in the hospital or public health. And so it's really important to make sure that we constantly do clinical research and share the findings so it informs policy and it informs practice. Next slide, please, because I don't think I could change. Next slide is the types of clinical research. So there's two different types of clinical research. There's observational studies, which I tend to do more of. So as a researcher, I'm more of a qualitative mixed methods researcher. And this is what I always do 100% of the time, observational studies. These types of studies observe, record, and analyze the subject in their natural environment without interfering, controlling, or testing any treatment. This is where if there's a new way of treating chronic disease or digital tools, if the digital tools is being implemented now and we want to assess how impactful it is or how effective it is, then you tend to do observational studies. Next slide, please. So it's not, so this type of studies is less focused on discovering treatment. It's more of understanding whether these treatment is effective or not, and how is it impacting the people that we want to serve. The next one is, previous slide. There's another slide before this. Could you just go back to the next slide? So the slide before that, I just broke it down to different types of studies because observational studies is a huge umbrella term that covers many different types of studies. So I've listed here in a table the different types of observational studies you could do. There's case studies, case series, which basically look at a small number of people that have a specific condition. So let's say a doctor reports on a few patients with rare side effects from a new medicine. That is a case study. Ecological study is comparing groups of people with a specific condition but in different locations. So kind of like observing how the vaccination from COVID-19, its impact in the different locations or where people are living. That's type of an ecological study. Cross-sectional study is looking at a snapshot of people at one point in time. So I do this a lot with surveys. So if you get a lot of if you get questioned to complete a survey on how your health is or how physically active are you this month, that tends to fall into cross-sectional study because we're specifically looking at your viewpoint or your experience at a specific time. Case control study is comparing people who already have a condition with people who don't. So you're comparing whether someone might have diabetes from people who might not have diabetes or maybe diabetic. And then cohort study is following a group of people over time. So if you want to see how the environment may impact people's health, you might want to follow them over time if they were born at a certain year, and then you just constantly collect data from them in the specific location that they live in, and then you want to see how that differs from, let's say you do it in Manchester, UK, where I live, and you get another group of people living in San Francisco, California, where I used to live, and you follow them over time. That falls under cohort study. Next slide, please. So this one, just going to the second type of clinical research is clinical trial phases. Clinical trials. Clinical trials are really important, especially in discovering new medicines and new treatment. Just briefly covering the different types of phases that clinical trials include. In phase one, clinical trial phase one is really focused on understanding the safety of a medication. So when a medication is discovered, preclinical trials usually covers any type of studies with animals or any type of desk-based studies that determines the effectiveness of a medication. In phase one trials, this goes more into testing whether that medication is actually really effective on humans. Now, there's a lot of regulations in going into phase one trials, so it's not that scientists found that this medication is effective in animal studies, and then now they decided that, oh, we should try it on humans. Before they could do that, they have to go through rigorous testing and making sure that it is safe, in fact, before you test it out on humans. But in phase one, scientists already determined that these medications or this medication is safe enough to consume by humans, and so they want to test it out. And again, it's a rigorous process where there's a lot of checks and balances and making sure that if someone do consume this, it won't go horribly wrong, and that there's going to be serious repercussion, although there might be. And so this is where phase one is really focused on whether the medication, this new medication, is safe to consume, and also trying to figure out the dosage of which it is safe to consume for humans. If that medication produces positive results, then it goes into phase two. Phase two also focuses on the safety of the medication, but then also it focuses on the effectiveness, trying to determine the effectiveness of the medication. And so it's a little bit more extensive in trying to understand the effectiveness of the medication, but because it looks at more people. Unlike phase one, where maybe less than 100 people are taking part in it, phase two, there's a little bit more people taking part in it, and it's a little bit longer. In phase three, it continues from phase two. So let's say phase two is successful and they found that it was safe, and they determined the optimal diet, what's the word? Medication treatment, the dose. There you go. The dose. They figured out the optimal dose of the medication, and they've seen that there's some effectiveness of it. Then they go into phase three. Phase three is very much similar to phase two, but phase three focuses on understanding whether different people from different backgrounds, different locations are experiencing the same impact, or are there any differences in it. There's also more people testing out the medication. So unlike in phase two, they were focused on maybe 100 to 200 participants testing this out. This is definitely a lot more, to hopefully reaching more, at least over 1,000 people testing out the medication. Phase four, you could kind of see this as the medicine have been proven to be effective and safe, and that they've identified the optimal dose of the medication. It's gone through rigorous testing, and the government regulatory departments, wherever you may be. For example, in the US, there's the Food and Drug Administration that tends to review the regulations and the effectiveness of these medications, and they'll say, okay, yes, you could let the public consume this. And that's where phase four comes out. Phase four is more of observing how these medications are being taken in real world, rather than in controlled settings. You're really observing how people are reacting to the medication. Are there any type of reaction that exists, or that starts to exist, that weren't discovered in phase three? And so there's a lot of close monitoring in phase four of these medications. Next slide, please. So just wanted to list all the different regulatory governing bodies in clinical research, because, as I said, it is very highly regulated. Every country has its own. In the UK here, we have the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, MHRA. They are more focused on digital tools or products that are used in healthcare. Health Research Authority definitely focuses more on clinical trials. If there are any type of clinical trials programs, the HRA often reviews them and determines whether it's ethical to do the study or not, and if it's rigorous and safe and all of that. As I mentioned, in the US, the counterpart is the Food and Drug Administration, and also the Institutional Review Board, which is the ethics body that, again, reviews the clinical trials. And in Europe, it's European Medicine Agency. So as you could see, every country has its own governing clinical research regulatory body that makes sure that any type of clinical trials or any type of clinical research is ethically conducted, it's safe, and risk is minimized, to make sure that it's a appropriate project, or it's an appropriate study to do. Next slide, please. So just wanted to further talk more about the process of keeping clinical research safe, because I think this is a really important thing to mention. As I mentioned, there's 4 phases in clinical trials: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. The exploratory phase which is, I would say, preclinical trials, are focused on really doing studies on animal testing, and also other type of studies that doesn't require any human engagement in it. So, for example, if a scientist is trying to work on developing a new medicine on diabetes, they will first do a lot of desk-based research. And when I say desk-based research, they'll do a lot of reviewing other studies that's been published in literature. They might be analyzing data that's already there, and trying to determine how this possible medication in diabetes might impact diabetes in humans. They might do tests on animals if they've developed the medication already, and if they find that the animals consuming it is experiencing positive impact, then they might start to move into then working on doing a clinical trial, which then goes into this pre-ethics approved study. So clinical research is highly regulated, as I mentioned to you. And so all the knowledge and information they generated from the exploratory stage is then presented to a regulatory body, and also any type of information that suggests why they're doing the study in humans, and that it will be safe in humans, are then presented in this pre-ethics approved study. So they can get that approval to go on doing a clinical trial, probably a phase 1 clinical trial. And then when the ethics is approved, that's when scientists and researchers are able to do the study. In this stage, you're really focused on, if you're going to start your phase 1 clinical trial, you must make sure that participants give consent, that they understand what they're doing, they understand the benefits and the consequences, and some of the procedures that will be required for them to take part in this. It has to be very transparent. And so this is another way of making sure that clinical research is safe, that participants are well aware in what they're doing, what are the risks, what are the benefits, what are the procedures, before they agree to take part. Next slide, please. So what happens in clinical research? So there's many different activities that happens with clinical research. In the researcher role, so I've been in the researcher role. The main task as a researcher, once you start identifying participants, is to explain what the study is or the trial is. You need to make sure that you have clear and easily understood information about the study that you want to get people to be involved in, the trial that you want them to engage in. You need to make sure that you screen appropriate people, because not everyone might be appropriate to take part in the study. And so oftentimes a researcher will have a list of eligibility criteria that helps us identify who is appropriate to engage in this study. Once that happens and you identified the participant and they've given their consent to take part in it, then you set up the first visit or the first activity they need to do to be part of the study. For some study or trial, you might be assigned in random groups, just to make sure that bias is reduced. It might not be the case that there's some kind of randomization. It really just depends on the study of the study design. And then you also just continue to collect data throughout the study. The study might be 6 months or a year or however long. And so the researcher really has to be clear in telling the participant how long you need to invest in taking part. In the participant's role side, one of the most important thing that a participant needs to receive is the information sheet that explain what the study is, what's being asked of them, what are the risks, what are the benefits, what are the procedures, what happens if this happens, and where to go for help. So it's really important that participants who are recruited in a study or in a trial receive this information early on. Ask all the questions and clarifications that you need to feel comfortable in taking part with the study. I would say ask as much questions as you can. You could also ask questions even if you agree to take part. Um, it's the researcher's duty to make sure that you're comfortable in taking part of the study throughout from start to finish. If you agree to take part, you will need to complete a consent form. So every studies, you should always complete a consent form stating that you agree to take part in any study and that you understand what's being asked of you. If accepted to the study or trial, you schedule the first visit. The researcher will ask you again when you can come in to do the first visit. You follow all the procedures that's being asked of you, or that's that the scientist or the researcher asks you to do. You may need to visit the study or trial sites, so something to consider. You also need to continue making sure that you regularly visit your doctor. I would say if it's a clinical trial, you should also make sure that your doctor is aware that you're being part of a clinical trial, especially if it's a medication or something like that, just so your doctor knows that you're consuming something that might affect your health. And so it's important to make sure that your regular physician, is in the loop in being part of the clinical trials. And then you also may be provided information about the results and possible next steps. So if you're really interested in some of the results, just make sure that you understand how the researchers will share that results with you. Next slide, please. So what are the risks of taking part in clinical research? So there's always risks in taking part in clinical research. It is important for you to clearly understand what the risks are early on. And so again, I highly recommend when you do get recruited in a study, or you decide you want to be part of a study, to really understand the information that is presented to you in these participant information sheet, or these information sheets really about the study. And if the researchers are not clear in explaining what the risks are, it's really important for you to make sure you understand them, because there are side effects in some research, especially in clinical trials. In the type of research that I do in observational studies, usually there aren't any side effects because there isn't any medication that we're giving out. But there may be side effects that are not from medicine, right? But just by taking part in some kind of intervention might affect you, your thinking, your mental health, anything. So there are still side effects in observational studies. It's just not as clear cut like in clinical trials, where if you're taking a new drug, you might have some side effects physically. Experimental treatment may not work better than standard treatment. That's something that you need to be aware of. As much as we researchers want to develop effective treatment, prevention, or new medicines, sometimes the research tells us it's not as effective as the standard treatment. And so it's important to appreciate that. And then may not get experimental treatment, but the standard treatment or no treatment. So this goes more into clinical trials, where you might be randomly positioned to not get the experimental drug, and you might just be getting a standard treatment. But again, the whole point of clinical trials is trying to understand whether this new drug is effective. And so there's going to have people receiving the new drug versus and comparing that to people who get standard treatment or no treatment. And so just be aware, if you are part of clinical trials, that there is a chance that you might think you're getting the treatment, the new treatment, but in actuality, you might just be getting standard treatment or no treatment. And so again, that's the risk that you want to consider. Next slide, please. So value of diverse participants in clinical trials. This is, I think, one of the most important aspects of making sure research is designed well and that you recruit participants effectively, because oftentimes the lack of representation from diverse backgrounds has serious repercussion on these clinical research findings. If you don't have diverse group of people taking part in clinical research, diverse age, diverse sex, diverse gender, diverse age group, diverse location where you live, so your socioeconomic status. If it's not diverse, it really minimizes the effectiveness of the findings, because the findings might not be generalizable, meaning that it might the innovation or the medicine might be effective in one set of group of people, but it might not be for others. And so that's a cost, a significant cost that could cost billions and billions of pounds or dollars or euros, and it could set back a lot of the discoveries. It hinders innovation. So, for example, developing the, again, COVID-19 vaccination, it was really essential for them to have diverse group of people, because you can't just test the vaccination for one group of people and not consider how other groups of people from different backgrounds might react to it, or good or bad reactions. So it's really important that the people who develop the vaccination in the onset included diverse people. It could also, without good diversity in the participants, it could cause the trial or the study to fail, lead lack of access to effective medical interventions. Again, the findings might suggest that this medicine might work, or this intervention might work for people from age 15 to 20, but it might not be effective in people aged 30 to 35. And so the trial might be a fail if the trial was supposed to be implemented from ages 15 to 50, right? And then also it undermines trust. There's always huge issues with research and communities being distrustful with research. And so it's vital that researchers engage people from diverse background and build that trust, because otherwise they won't. Increasing diversity will really become more of a challenge, and it's already a challenge. It's already a challenge as a researcher. I would say, as a researcher, it's difficult for me to engage with underengaged populations, and that really affects the study that I do, because it affects the findings, and then again it impacts my ability to generalize my findings, and so this is where it's really important in the onset to consider diversity, and it's important for researchers along with communities to figure out how to work better together. Otherwise, it will worsen disparities and health inequities, which is something that we all in healthcare want to address, and public health, right? Healthcare and public health, we always talk about addressing inequities and health disparities, because certain communities are more affected in health than others. And this is one of the ways how we could address this, is making sure that diversity is addressed early on in clinical trials, in health research, in any type of clinical research activities. Next slide, please. So just wanted to show you some data, because I thought this was really interesting. If you don't believe me yet that diversity is a problem in clinical research. I found this from Inclusive Belong in Research 2025, and they, in their, I guess, the blog that I saw this, they were just presenting how in the left side, this shows the distribution of the UK population by ethnicity. And then on the right side, this is the distribution of population from different ethnic background that engages in clinical trial. And you could kind of see the stark difference with the different groups of people who take part in clinical trials. There's 86% more white adults taking part in clinical trials versus 5% of Asians, 4% in Blacks, and other 5%. And so if you live in a diverse country like the UK or the US or different parts of Europe, it's really important to make sure that your population reflects the breakdown of participants in your clinical trials or clinical research studies. Next slide, please. This one was a data that I found from the US, where they showed the different breakdown of diversity in terms of their participants. So it's interesting how the sex distribution is nearly half. But again, when it comes to ethnicity, you could see the breakdown. 76% of participants were white, Asians were 11%, Black or African American were 7%, and other 5%, and American Indian or Alaska Native is 1%. So you could still see that there's some kind of distribution of different ethnic groups, but it might not be enough to show the diversity of the country, because the US is very much diverse, and I would expect there would be more people who identify as who are American Indian or Alaska Native to be taking part in clinical trials, but it's definitely a place where it needs to increase. Age distribution, as you could see, 69% are under 65 who engaged, whereas 31% were, over 65. And so that's going to be a concern, because if the medication or treatment is specifically for elderly adults, and the clinical trial is having a really hard time trying to recruit older population, then the findings of that study is going to be really limited, and essentially going to impact the effectiveness of the discovery. Next slide, please. Eligibility in taking part in clinical research. So this, I just wanted to raise that you all, especially if you're an adult, ages 18 and above, are eligible in taking part in any clinical research. That said, every research has a criteria. Sometimes in my research, I will want people who have lived experience having diagnosed in breast cancer, and they must be ages 35 to 55. They must be living in a specific location. Those are my eligibility criteria. And so that's something just to keep in mind of if you want to take part in clinical research, that make sure that you fall within the eligibility criteria. Otherwise, they'll say thank you, but they won't include you in the study. Again, making sure that as a researcher, it's important to acknowledge the importance of diverse participants, whether it's ethnicity, sex, age, different socioeconomic status, such as where they live, their educational level, the annual income they have. Those are things to also consider. And so it's really important to have diverse people to be part of studies. Next slide, please. Here, just wanted to show another set of data where I believe this was this is from the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry. And they found that 58% of UK adults said they would be willing to join a clinical trial. 44% of UK white adults participate, but 36% of UK ethnic minority adults participate. And so you could kind of already see the disparities in terms of ethnicity in taking part in clinical trials. Next slide, please. And this one also found that 42% of oncology clinical trials in the UK do not include a single Black patient, according to recent research from a clinical data science company. And so this is really alarming. Oncology studies are vital because, you know, many people get affected by cancer, and there's always push to find new cancer treatment. And if there isn't any single Black patient taking part in this is really a significant problem, because the treatment produced from these studies might not be appropriate for Black patients or any other people of color that might not be part in these clinical trials. And so this is really important to address, and making sure that diversity from different backgrounds are included in any type of clinical trials, particularly here in oncology. Next slide, please. There's many reasons why people do want to take part in clinical research. I just listed a couple of ones here. I'm sure you could also identify some of the reasons why you would want to take part in clinical research. Some people want to be part of the discovery phase of new treatment. They want to contribute to their experience, to that process, especially if they've been affected by that disease or that health problem, where the scientists and researchers are trying to find a new treatment or innovation to address it. They feel like they're playing a more active role in their health, and the treatment in their health condition does not work, or there is no treatment. So there's cases where you might have a disease that is not common, a very rare disease, and there's a clinical trials that is trying to discover a new medication for it or a new treatment. And so you might want to take part in that. As I mentioned, some people want to be part of scientific discovery. Also, sometimes some people might want, their focus is to contribute to the future health of the generation. And so they might want to take part in those clinical trials. Next slide, please. And this, I just wanted to give you an example of, I believe there might be another slide before this. Could you go back? Yeah, go back another one, please. Take part. There you go. This slide, people's reasons not to get involved. And so there are many reasons why people might not want to be involved in clinical research. I just listed a couple of ones here. And this is where it's good for you all to reflect why you wouldn't want to take part in clinical research. I mean, there's many, many reasons, and it's your personal decisions why you would want to take part in clinical research or not. And so just listing a couple here that's common barriers that may cause a person not to take part in clinical research is geographical location. Sometimes these clinical trials are located in big cities or in locations that are really difficult to get to. So that's definitely a challenge. Inflexible visit schedules. This is definitely a challenge, especially for people who's working in different hours. Oftentimes researchers work from 9 to 5, and you know, if you're being asked to go into 9 to 5, but you're working 9 to 5 as well, it's really a barrier for you to take part in this. Transportation challenges, that is certainly a big issue. If you have to take multiple buses or trains to get to the sites, you know, would you really be encouraged to do that? So that's something to consider along with travel cost, and also childcare or family care. If you're taking care of someone, will you be able to take the time to go to DSite and engage in the studies? And so again, just listing a couple of some reasons why people might not engage, but that's something that I would encourage everyone to consider thinking about. What are some of the reasons why you would want to engage, and what are some of the reasons or factors that may cause you not to engage? Next slide, please. How to get involved. And so this is kind of a topic that I wanted to cover at the end, to encourage you to think about how do you actually get involved, because oftentimes we ask people, oh, you should be part of clinical research, or maybe you want to be part of clinical trials. Challenge is that most people don't know how to get involved. And so I'm just listing here a couple of ways that will help you get involved. I think one of the main thing that you could do is just start being aware of the different types of clinical research that's out there. One of the best way to do that is when you go to your doctor or your GP, to take a look at whether there's any kind of flyers that is recruiting for any type of clinical research studies, or you could ask your doctor or nurse if they know of any type of clinical research that you would be eligible to take part in. NIHR Clinical Research, this is the website that you could go to. They list the different types of clinical research, and NIHR is a UK government body that lists all the different types of clinical research studies that you could take part in. Charity organizations is also a good source of research studies and projects. So if you know of any type of charity organizations that you want to work with, if you have specific health conditions, in the UK, there's a lot of charity organizations that focuses on addressing specific health conditions, like the ones that I've listed here, and they would be a good source of information of studies and clinical trials and clinical research projects. And I'm sure every other country, wherever you are, you might want to seek out charity organizations. The MAC Clinical Research is one example of a private clinical trial organization. There's many different private clinical trials organizations out there. So just listing this one private organization that lists different types of clinical trials they are in charge of. And then also just wanted to let you know to consider different social media, Facebook, Facebook, Instagram. I'm sure TikTok might have them. Also apps like Prober. They list different types of research opportunities for people. And so keep them in mind that social media and apps like Prober are also a source of information. It's really just how do you find these research projects out there, is I think one of the big task that people face. And so hopefully some of these gives you ideas of where you could find opportunities. Next slide, please. And this one I just posted here because I just wanted to show you a typical flyer that you might see in your GP or NHS trust that you visit. And so if you keep an eye out in flyers in the bullet board, oftentimes people will post these recruitment flyers for people to take part in studies. And so this is one of the ways to identify these opportunities. Next slide, please. And so before I ask if you have any questions from me, I just wanted to ask you all this question. Would you consider taking part in research? Yes, no, maybe. And when you're thinking of answering this, think of what are your reasons in taking part in clinical research. Again, as I mentioned, there are many reasons why people would want to take part in it. There's many reasons why people might not want to take part in it. And then also, what are your concerns? It's really important to be clear in understanding yourself and the concerns that you might have in taking part of any type of research study. That said, I think the next slide is just FAQs. Yep, FAQs. So if there's any questions with what I've covered so far, and I've been asked if I asked 2 questions for giveaways. So we're giving away, the organizers are giving things away. And I would say the first, if anyone could answer the first question, if you could just go back to that first question. If you go back to the other slide, sorry. Yes, if you could answer this, would you consider taking part in research? Yes, no, maybe. And a second question might be, what are your concerns with taking part in clinical research? If you could answer those questions, you might receive a giveaway.
And I think there's someone in the chat that said, yes, they do have a question.
Perfect. I don't see the chat.
Yeah, so I'll read it out to you.
Okay.
Kisembo from the AMAPH Africa, do you have a question? I know he wrote in it, but okay. So Sylvie, okay, so we have Sylvie Marie. Hold on, let me see. Okay, so she answered one of the questions. So she answered the question of what are your concerns? And she said, maybe because I am scared of the medication side effects.
Yeah, and definitely a major concern for many people, me included. I'm not gonna lie. And so this is where it's really helpful for you to speak to the researchers and really understanding what are those risks for side effects. What will happen if you experience those side effects? What's the next step? You know, if you've experienced some kind of side effect from these medications, how will the researchers support you? How will your GP support you? What kind of resources are you going to receive if there's some kind of terrible side effect? So that's something that you could bring up to the researcher, and they should
So
give
we have
you.
a
They should be able to give you good answers, not just generic answers.
So we have a comment from Shiny Prashad. So sorry. She said, interesting insights. Thank you so much for the session. What I would definitely look into getting involved. I think most common concerns would be lack of awareness.
Yes, I agree. I think that's something that everyone struggles with, me included. Again, as a researcher, you would think I would know all the research that's happening in organizations. But I would say if you go back into the slide where I give you a list of ways to identify opportunities, that would be a good start. I would say your good start would be speaking to your GP. Again, they might know, because oftentimes a lot of researchers will go to the GP's general practitioner or your primary care provider to help with recruiting participants. So they would always be good. I've noticed now in Instagram and Facebook, they're also posting different recruitment flyers for studies. So keep an eye out on that. And if you have a little bit more time and you're really interested in really understanding or getting to know different opportunities, just Google clinical trials or health research in your location, wherever you are. And that might be a good first start where you could find opportunities.
So we have another comment from Sneha. And she said, my concern will be the unknown adverse events and other associated risk, which I think you've addressed that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we have one from Kisembo Henry from AMAPH Africa. And he said, as African participation in clinical trial is very critical, as it ensures inclusivity and equity for all communities and races. I think that was just a comment. Let me know if I read it all right, Kisembo. We just got another comment, and that's from Miriam A. And it's a question. It's, digital twins have non-biased data to speed progress rather than years.
Say that again, sorry.
Yeah, so sorry. Okay. So she's saying, and there's a question mark, so I'm assuming this is a question, but she said digital twins have non-biased data to speed progress rather than years.
I don't know if that's a question.
Miriam, can you clarify and let us know if it's a question or a comment? And if it's a question, can you reformat it, please?
I have heard of digital twin now, especially in digital health, where companies are developing your digital twin. So they will develop my twin digitally and use that to look at how my health will change over time if I act a certain way, different from how I act as a real person. I'm not as extensively knowledgeable about what that impact is and the progress of that. But I know that's definitely something in the works where they're developing digital twins and using that as a way to for personalized medicine, but also predict if certain activities, behaviors, lifestyle that you adapt might influence, your health outcome.